Well, let's look at creating our first simple HMI program. Now this course is generally a PLC programming course, not an HMI development course, so we are not going to get super in-depth into HMI development, but PLC programming without HMI development is really extremely limited. So for that reason, we at least want to go over the fundamentals of HMI development. We have in front of us a PLC program designed to control a blower, and it uses HOA control. So right away, at this point, you should be able to recognize the logic. We have rung 0 looking for 3 different push buttons from our HMI. So obviously we know we're going to have to program those 3 push buttons onto our screen. We have a hand, an off, and an auto push button. Each one has a one-shot, which then, for one scan and one scan only, moves a value to our status integer for our blower. That is 0 for off, 1 for hand, 2 for auto. Then when we come down to rung 1, this is where we're energizing our blower output bit, and this is not addressing an actual output, but just a bit, because we have our I/O set up properly in this program. We are looking at 2 different statuses to allow our blower to energize. We're looking at the blower to be in auto mode and to have this bit energized, which is a blower call from program logic, or for our blower to be in hand mode, in which case we don't require any other conditions. We're going to tell our blower to run. And if you don't understand what this blower call bit is, this is for automatic control of our blower. If we have a greater process, one that at times is going to automatically turn our blower on and off, this is the bit that will be energized somewhere else in the program to allow this blower to run, but only if it's in automatic mode. And the only other thing we have going on in this program is we associate our blower out bit, which we're energizing in rung 1, with an actual output, and this output is coming right off of the PLC itself. So our output is 0:0, but for the extent of this lecture, that's not really going to matter. You'll notice I have all of the logic in one program ladder, and that is not a best practice, but this is a very small program, and this is just for demo purposes for an HMI. So for that reason and simplicity's sake, I just threw it all into the main ladder, ladder 2. So let's start developing our HMI. I have FactoryTalk View Studio, which is Alan Bradley's primary HMI development package. And we're going to come up here and click on the New Application button, and we're going to give it the name Blower Demo and click Create. So it takes a little bit because there are a lot of different things that go into an HMI project, but once this finally settles down, we'll start developing and creating a one-screen program, defining a few tags, and then in the end we're going to go ahead and run this HMI live with our PLC program to see it working. Okay, it looks like the program's settled down and we're ready to start developing. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up an OPC server connection to our emulator, RS Logix Emulate 500, which is running our PLC program. This is not a step that you always have to do, specifically not when you're running an actual PLC. But since we're running an emulator and FactoryTalk doesn't speak directly to the emulator driver, we're going to have to use an OPC server, which is an option built into RS Links for communication with other types of devices and HMIs. So we're going to come over here to our project, right click, add new server. We're going to get an OPC data server. We'll go ahead and call that blower. and we're going to browse, which will bring up the option for an RSLinx OPC server, which is running on our computer, of course. We'll hit OK, and that will give us access to our tags within the Blower program. So now let's go ahead and set up our display. We'll right-click on Displays and click New, and that brings us up this very plain window. We'll go ahead and stretch that out just so we have a little bit more working room, even though it doesn't change the actual size of our display at runtime. Right-click somewhere in this window, and I'm going to take Display Settings. And I'm in the mood for a black screen today, so I'm going to go ahead and click the color black. I like high contrast. And what do we need? Well, we have an HOA controlled blower, which means we would like to see something that looks like a blower. We'd like to be able to see if that blower is running or not. We're also going to need our handoff and auto buttons, and it would be nice to have a status indicator telling us what mode our blower is actually in, whether it's in hand, off, or auto. So let's start creating. I'm going to go ahead and start by creating a momentary push button. So we have this blue button, and when we double click on it, here are all of our setup properties. We're going to go ahead and start with connections. So let's click on Tag. Here we have our Blower Demo project, and this is our OPC server for the blower. And you'll see we have several other OPC options under there for other projects, but in this case we're just worried about blower. And we're going to look at offline tags in this blower program. And I know you're seeing a lot of tags in here which you don't remember being in the program. Those are things left over in the data table which aren't being used anymore. The blower program we're using actually is a copy of a larger program which I hacked everything else out of. But all of the descriptions are still in the data file, so that's why we're seeing them now. What we are looking for are blower buttons. And we have right here our blower auto PB, blower hand PB, and blower off PB. So we'll go ahead and start with our blower hand PB. And we have state 0 and state 1. State 0 is when this button is not being pressed. State 1 is when this button is being pressed. So let's start by defining state 0. A background color, we'll give it this lovely shade of gray, and we'll give it the caption hand. Let's apply that so we see what it looks like. Well, right away I see a problem that the word hand isn't very noticeable, so let's make it bold, and we'll also change that caption color to black, and we'll make it a 16-point font. We'll click OK, and that looks a lot better. And for our state 1, unless we want our button turning blue every time we press it, we'll take a darker gray. We'll also write the word hand in there, 16-point, and we won't make it bold. And we will leave the font white, so whenever you press the button, it'll change a little bit, it'll change colors. And that way the operator knows he actually pushed the button. So what a momentary push button is going to do is when the operator presses that button, it's going to write to this location, our blower hand PB value in our PLC. It's going to set it to 1, and then whenever the operator lets go of this button, it's going to return the value to 0. And that's exactly what we want it to do. And just like we have a hand button, we're going to want an off and auto button as well. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this button, and I'm going to move it down here, and let's align it so it looks kind of nice. We're going to need an off and an auto, so I'll just go ahead and create 2 different copies at the same time. And let's put them both in alignment. So let's set the properties for the second button. First thing we'll do so we don't forget is reset the tag. Now we don't want this one set to the hand push button. This one's going to be set to the off push button. So we'll go back into our tags and take our blower off push button. And then for states, we're going to leave everything looking the same, only we're going to change our caption to off to distinguish this from our hand and auto push buttons. Hit apply and hit OK. And now let's go ahead and set up our third button. Same thing, we'll go to connections. This is going to be our auto button, so we'll take blower auto PB. Our states, we'll go ahead and change the label to auto as well. Hit apply, hit OK. And that easily we've set up our three buttons which will be controlling our blower. So the next thing we want to do is we want to know what mode we're actually in. Are we in hand, or are we in off, or are we in auto? So we'll go up here and we'll take this multi-state indicator and we'll put that right here. Double click on it to bring up the properties. First thing we have to do is set our number of states. So we already know hand, off, and auto, that's 3 states. We'll set that to 3. And then we need to set our states for 0, 1, and 2. Now let's look back to our program real quick to see how we had those states mapped. We know we're mapping to N711, and we have 0 as off, 1 as hand, and 2 as auto. And we're certainly going to want to make sure those match up with our HMI program. So 0 we're going to label as off. 1 was hand, so we're going to go ahead and set that as hand in our HMI. And by default, that leaves auto for state 2. And let's go ahead and put some more interesting colors in here. So for off, let's go ahead and set the background color to red. For hand, let's go ahead and set that color to yellow. For auto, we'll call it green. And then we're going to change our fonts. We're going to make that 16 point again and black, so it stands up real nicely. And we'll do that for our other 2 labels as well, hand and auto. And we get a very simple display. And let's go ahead and line it up with everything else just so it fits and looks neat and it doesn't look like something that a 2-year-old drew with his elbows. And now we want to display something that looks like a blower. We can use all kinds of different graphics and import them into this environment. However, FactoryTalk comes with several symbols and graphics already built in. So if we look at this libraries and symbols and images here in our project navigation pane, this has already a lot of things in it that are there by default when we start a new project. So I'm going to expand libraries, and unfortunately we don't have blowers up here, but we do have the next best thing, and that's pumps. And we're going to take a generic pump icon which can look a lot like a blower, and we're going to paste that into our project right here. Now that's a pretty small blower, so we're going to blow it up and make it a much bigger blower. Now that looks great, and we can get rid of our library of images. And now we want to be able to see if this blower is running or if this blower is not running. So we're going to use some color animations to do that. So I'm selecting what looks like just this fan. I'm going to right click on that and select animation, color, and we're going to go straight for the tags. And right here we have our blower tags. Let's look back to our PLC program and see what was the tag called that we were using to energize our blower. We had that labeled as simply blower. Remember, this description up top, which says blower out bit, that's just for within the PLC program. But what you see in green is what's available elsewhere. So we're going to go ahead and refer to this blower bit, which is going to be energized anytime our blower's running, regardless of what mode it's in, whether it's in hand or auto. For the display on the blower, we're not trying to show hand off and auto, we're just trying to show it's either running or not. So we're going to refer to that blower bit. And now that we've defined that, we'll set a couple of states. And by default, you see factory sets 0 is red and 1 is green. Hit apply, hit close. And something I just realized we didn't do when we were setting up our multi-state indicator is we never defined the tag. So we need to go ahead and associate that with our blower mode. That way it's going to be able to read that 0, 1, or 2 and define the appropriate state. And I'm also going to bold up those displays just so they're a little bit more visible and a little more attractive when we look at them. There we go. And this program should be ready to run. So let's go ahead and save this display that we've created. We'll go ahead and call it main. And we'll close out of there. And now let's go ahead and test our application. So we go up to application and hit test application. It's going to create a runtime file, and then it's going to run that on our computer, even though this HMI project was actually developed for a standalone screen. Alright, and here is our simulated HMI. And if we look right now, our blower is red and it shows that it's in the off position, so it's not running. If we click auto, now it's in auto mode, but since we don't have process logic energizing the auto control bit, it still isn't running. Now if we put it into hand mode, now we see that blower turns green, which means it's actually running, and it shows that we're in hand control mode. So this is what our HMI program was supposed to do. And it is that simple to set up a basic HMI program. You define the tags, define the communication, drop in your controls, and it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Obviously, a real HMI program for a live project will have a lot more controls, a lot more displays, a lot more graphics, maybe even some custom graphics and things like that. But really, it's all just more of the same. It's the same basic concepts multiplied several times over. If you can make a small HMI like this, making a larger one is only a matter of a little more creativity and a lot more time.